test before, and some of us have done well, and some of us just, well, we don't want to talk about it. But either way, the outcome was influenced by some factor. With this in mind, Brandon Wong claims that students' test scores are not solely dependent on teacher effectiveness, rather on other factors. His claims were, students have different levels of motivation, different approaches to learning, different responses to specific classroom environments, instructional practices, and different learning styles. Second claim is, parental unemployment has adverse consequences on a child's behavior and academic achievement. His third claim is, parental involvement significantly affects student learning. His fourth claim is, low-income schools are receiving less funding than high-income schools. And his final claim is, there is a large difference in the quality of education between low-income and high-income schools. I, on the other hand, claim that student test scores are solely dependent on teacher effectiveness. As defined by the usability glossary, effectiveness is defined as the attribute of guiding the user through all parts of the task and ensuring that the task is properly completed, as defined by the usability glossary. Now, because of time, I will only challenge 3 of his claims. As a refresher, Brandon claimed that students have different levels of motivation, different approaches to learning, different responses to specific classroom environments, instructional practices, and different learning styles. I respond by claiming that teachers have the power to influence how material is taught, what learning environment is provided, and to motivate less confident students to meet the needs of their students so they are successful when tested on the material. By saying that test scores are affected by students' different level of motivation, learning environment, and learning style is partly true because tests are standardized to measure all students on an even scale according to the Ohio Department of Education. So with that said, motivation, learning style, and learning environment are under the control of a teacher. According to the Oklahoma's Central Public Schools Teacher Duties and Responsibilities Agreement, a teacher's duties are to plan a program to study that as much as possible meet the individual needs, interests, and abilities of the students, and create a classroom environment that is conducive to learning and the appropriate maturity and interests of students. So when a teacher honors their duty, they can adjust their teaching methods to meet the students' needs. They are the only ones who can develop and maintain the classroom environment and are considered a leader in the classroom, thus having an influencing power to motivate the lazy students. Brandon also claimed that parental involvement significantly affects student learning. I, however, profess that a student's time in school is what develops them as a student and as a person. Although students spend the majority of their time at home, what really builds their character is the time they spend in school. According to David Stevenson of Stanford University, schools are environments that establish a series of developmental tasks. Having that interaction with other students and teachers allows a student to explore who they are compared to the various backgrounds, and moreover, it's the opinions and ideas created by those not related to them that influence the student the most. Brandon's final claim was that there is a large difference in the equality of education between low-income and high-income schools. I cannot agree with this claim, as I assert that despite a school being low-income and high-income, its economic instability or stability should not affect a student's learning development, as a teacher should provide resources regardless of money available or lack thereof. High-tech gadgets and brand new textbooks are not needed to teach a student a fundamental lesson. If a teacher in a low-income school only has second edition books and no computers, I'm sure there's plenty of paper and pencils of all kinds that can teach a student just as well as a student with a computer in front of them. According to William Bennett from CNN, responding to a study by economists Raj Chetty, John Freeman, and John Rockoff, a teacher with a high value-added approach joins a school. School scores rise immediately in the grade taught by that teacher. When a high VA teacher leaves, test scores fall. Value added refers to the scale that grades a teacher based on the approach that they use towards the students. So in conclusion, I hope that you can see the connection that the teacher has to every aspect of the learning process, and thus does affect the results of testing for all students. Thank you.
All right, you've got an opening, interesting. The advocate's main points are listed. There are way too many secondary points, and so you've decided to focus on 3 of them. You ought to explain why the 3 that you choose to respond to are the most important ones. Why would they make the most difference? Because if the other 3 or 4 get ignored and they are independent, like their cluster arguments, that would leave your position vulnerable to a simple response by saying, well, that ignores X, Y, and Z, which also prove the point, and so I can suggest that my claim is valid because those arguments haven't been answered. If they are substantially alike, for instance, then maybe some of the arguments that you're making apply to both issues. I thought you did a good job identifying the issues that you're going to respond to. Sometimes I think the information that you present gives you the start of an argument, but you need a little bit more follow-through. For example, the Oklahoma schools agreement that you are citing lists as an objective what the teacher's supposed to do, but doesn't indicate that there's any way that that has been measured or that it's been accomplished. You need some examples that go along with their, with that sort of effectiveness. Later on, when you're using the evidence about value-added teachers, you kind of give us this conclusionary statement without talking about what that all means, value-added teachers. In other words, those who have extra training, those who are extra motivated, those who are adaptable, those who are worth more. I'm not quite sure what that means, and you need to argue it more because that's a big part of your response here. On the next point, you basically are trying to diminish the importance of parental involvement, but your counterclaim is a very general response here, talking about how important development is by being in school. I'm not sure that those 2 points are competing with each other. The advocate's argument basically suggests that students that do the best have a high degree of involvement by their parents in their academics. That does not necessarily mean that they prevent them from developing at school or that activities at school don't benefit them also, but it's a correlation as to why some people succeed and some don't, and the teachers not having much control over the parental involvement. I think that's the inference that the advocate's making on that particular point. And then on your last point, you basically say, well, they should succeed regardless of the resources, and you've got these kind of hypotheticals here talking about the fancy devices and so on and so forth, and I think that that's an interesting point, although I think it is somewhat hypothetical. Just to give you a for instance, because having paid for more frickin' pencils than I care to shake a stick at, my wife, who's an elementary school teacher in El Monte, can't get those kids to learn how to bring a pencil to school, much less, have them bring paper and have the supplies, that sort of thing. So when you say secondhand textbooks, those would be great. How about just a damn pencil, And sometimes the resources that are missing are not the most critical things, they're the little things and those become problems. I do think that there's a good argument here with the Bennett evidence that says that teachers that have the right skills are able to overcome those kinds of problems, and I think you need to explain what those skills are and how we find those teachers and show that that's the problem is that we need to fix the people that we have being teachers as opposed to worrying about whether or not the kids have eaten.